welcome to all those attending today's webinar, facilitated by ICAHD UK. Once again, we have an international audience, and we are thrilled to see some people new to us joining for the first time. I'd like to say a few brief words about us before we move into our program. ICAHD UK was established in 2004 with our launch held in the Houses of Parliament. Since then, we have represented ICAHD, the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions, here through our education and awareness raising activities, lobbying of Parliament, involvement of rebuilding Palestinian homes and structures, with people from the UK going out to participate. We've developed campaigns mobilized around the call for Israel to stop demolishing Palestinian homes and structures vital for living. ICAHD has always included a major focus on the big picture, the need to end what we describe now as Israel's settler colonialism and apartheid policies over the Palestinian people in our call for there to be one democratic state. Today's webinar is very special because it is happening at a time when we commemorate 75 years since the Nakba. This anniversary is being highlighted through hundreds, if not thousands, activities happening now for the rest of the month of May. And so the program tonight is ICAHD's way to focus on it. Leading us through this webinar will be Jeff Halper, ICAHD's co-founder and director. Jeff is an academic, an activist, an author, and a former Nobel Peace Prize nominee. Jeff will speak and provide the introduction to our guests, Eitan and Eléonore Bronstein, whose book title is the theme for this webinar, Nakba, Struggle to Decolonize Israel. Following their discussion, we will open up for some questions from those attending, so please put them in the chat line. And then we'll end with me giving some announcements of exciting events and opportunities coming up. Okay, thank you very much. So Jeff Halper, we welcome you. Will you speak to us now from Jerusalem?
All right, thank you, Linda, for that. Thank you all for joining us as well. As Linda said, the focus of tonight's webinar discussion with Eleonore and Eitan is the Nakba, of course. May 15th, which is just in a couple of days, marks the 75th anniversary of the Nakba, the catastrophe that befell the Palestinian people in 1948. But I think what's important to emphasize, and I'm sure Eleonore and Eitan will do this, is that the Nakba was not just a one-time event, tragic and huge as it was, but it's actually ongoing. And not only is it ongoing in terms of the ongoing tragedy and displacement and so on, but it certainly impacts in terms of where we're able to go in terms of a political resolution. All of these kinds of issues we'll discuss in a second with Eleonore and Eitan. So what we've done in ICAHD to mark the 75th anniversary of the Nakba is to put together a short film, a little less than 20 minutes, in which we highlight Israeli voices, actually, Israeli Jewish voices reflecting on the Nakba. I mean, there'll be a lot of room for Palestinian voices. There'll be a lot of obviously conversation about this and so on. But one of ICAHD's roles, we're called the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions for a purpose. First of all, because in terms of house demolitions and the occupation and the tragedies and everything else, including the colonial situation, we take responsibility as Israelis. And so we emphasize the Israeli part. But another reason is that we're trying to introduce a critical, either anti-Zionist or certainly anti-colonial voice into the discussion. There are a lot of important voices in the whole discussion around Palestine. There are Palestinian voices, of course. There's critical Jewish voices from abroad. There's the voices of many of you in political and human rights organizations. There's voices of churches, of governments. The one crucial voice in all of this is the Israeli voice, especially the critical Israeli voice, because obviously the Israelis are a key part of this whole equation. So we put together a short film. We're just going to show you, I think, one or two short bites, just a couple of the Israeli participants reflecting on the Nakba. So I think Malcolm's going to show that now.
The political discourse in Israel tends to describe the political reality in some zero-game terms, meaning that for one side to win, the other must lose, or that the memorization of one side's history necessitates the erasure of that of the other. In this line, we can find patterns of thought and beliefs such as it's either us or them, or acknowledging their pain and their trauma will lead to the erasure of our pain and trauma. This way of thinking has many negative consequences. One of them is that we are afraid of the other. From this fear stems the perception that we are always in danger of perishing, hence we'll always live on our swords, will always venerate human sacrifice, and that there is no way out of the continual state of war, occupation, displacements, and repression. Buzzwords such as restoring deterrence legitimize disproportionate violence and even war crimes. It is therefore misleading to think of the Nakba, the Palestinian disaster, in terms of past tense. It is instead an ongoing event. The damage that the ongoing Nakba generates is, of course, tremendous for Palestinians, but it is no less destructive for us as a people and individuals. Not only is the violence that we direct towards Palestinians also directed inwards, moreover, our perspectives, ethics, and morality, the capability to see the reality from the other's viewpoint and make decisions accordingly, are being gradually eroded and bringing us to the abyss. The Palestinian disaster is also ours, and their future is our future.
75 years after the Nakba, the Israeli state and the Israeli society keep lying, denying, avoiding, doing everything they can not to admit the Israeli responsibility for the Nakba and for 2/3 of the Palestinians being forcibly displaced from their homes, their field, their country. It is time now for all Israelis, and for that matter, for all Jews who think that they care about Israel, to admit not just the responsibility, but to admit that they have avoided facing it, avoided a solution to the problem that they have created, and to act together with the Palestinians for a solution which is just, which is peaceful, and which allows all those living in Palestine and the refugees who have a right to return, as the UN has decreed, all of them to live between the river and the sea in a democracy for all people who live there, not just for Jews. We don't want a Jewish democracy, we want a people's democracy in the whole of Palestine, not a Zionist democracy for the master race. And now is the time to do that.
Those are just two of the voices of a number of voices in the video that you can see on our website as well. Okay, now I want to turn to the main discussion with Eléonore Marza Bronstein and Eitan Bronstein Aparicio. Eleonore and Eitan are longtime friends of mine. I won't speak for Eleonore, but Eitan is a member of the One Democratic State campaign, an early member, together with me, and we've worked together for many years, and I really respected the work that they've been doing. So rather than me talking, obviously, let me just, and so the whole idea is more of a conversation, but letting Eitan and Eleonore go into the issues, especially around the Nakba that they have to talk about. So where we'll start is just this. First of all, give us a little bit of background in terms of who you are, your work, your political work, certainly De-Colonizer, which is your latest project, and then something about your book and why the focus on the Nakba.
Okay, good evening. And thank you for having us here. We are really happy to, in fact, to launch for the first time publicly our book, the English version. It was published first in 2018 in Hebrew, and then a couple of months later in French. So now it's published in English, and soon we hope it will be published in Arabic too. So yeah, it means that it shows also that the relevance, like it's still relevant. People find it important to publish and print it and translate it in other languages. I think yes, of course. We talked in very beautiful words by Livnat and Chaim before, and I think today we should start from mentioning what's going on today. In fact, today, this very evening, after the killing by Israel of 13 Palestinians just 2 days ago, and now half of Israel more or less is paralyzed or in fears, and Gaza is under constant attacks. And I think it's again a tragic demonstration why when we talk about the Nakba, it's not a single event that happened in 48. I mean, it was, as you said, Jeff, of course, it's the peak of the colonial, settler colonialism, Zionist settler colonialism, but it's still ongoing, even today, the very time that we are talking now. And the background also, of course, it relates to the book. The book itself tells, in fact, our stories, like also personal, very personal stories. So I would say some words about my story. Eleonore will, I'm sure, say some things about her story that maybe it's less known. When you will read the book, you will find how interesting it is.
Thank you.
Because I started Zochrot in 2001. And in fact, I remember that one of my inspirations at that time, and these years, was the work of ICAHD. I still remember very well, I went with my eldest son, that now is 36 almost. And we went once together to rebuild the house. And it was very important because of the physical body practice of resistance, like through the body. It's not just talking about, okay, well, like what we do now, for example, that of course it's important, but I find always the practice by doing things, this is the most effective, I think, in terms of learning, in terms of politicizing. And I think also the work of Zochrot that we did, the practical aspect of it, of visiting, keep visiting destroyed localities, Palestinian localities from 1948, by Jewish Israelis, together with Palestinians, telling the stories of the destroyed localities, posting signs on those places, that this was in fact the initial idea. In fact, before that we started all the work, there was only an idea came to my mind one day after one visit in Canada Park, what's called Canada Park by Israelis. It's the Latrun area in the middle of the country, and came to my mind, why not to post signs here to indicate the destruction of Emwas, of Yalu village there, where is the Canada Park that was established by the JNF, Kakal. So it's really was very much a project, or it is still a project as a whole, a project of doing things on the ground. Then in 2000, and this what we wrote, in fact, the book about. Most of the story was about how this work started, but it was also my own personal story of becoming an Israeli. It was mainly, I have to say, ideas of Eleonore, how to dig into this history and how to connect our personal stories, how me as a person that was born in Argentina in 1960, not even a Jewish, moved when I was 5 years old to a kibbutz, had to change the name. I was born as Claudio, I became Eitan, so Eitan, a perfect Israeli, strong Eitan in Hebrew, Eitan, firm, strong, exactly the Zionist mythology of becoming the strong Jewish person, whatever. And becoming an Israeli, went to the army and all this story. And how I became like really, I would say, Zochrot, the anti-Zionist, or challenging very much the core of Zionism and the Nakba. So this is briefly and roughly my side maybe of the story, but I think it would be interesting to hear from Eleonore a bit about herself and how she was engaged in it, how she knew about it, or yeah, maybe.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us tonight with you. I'm very glad to be online for this event with all of you. So I like to define myself as a feminist, a Jewish and decolonial activist, with all its big names, so we could dig into each of them. And I have a very different story from Eitan. I myself was not born an Israeli, and in fact, until today, I'm not an Israeli because I refused to do Aliyah. It was for me obvious that I would not take rights that would be granted to me because I'm a Jew. So I didn't make Aliyah. Still, I was privileged enough to be born in a white country with a white passport that allowed me to live in Israel. And I married Eitan also. For me, this book was, of course, a testimony on an account on how the Nakba, that was a non-object, something that was like so much lost in the Israeli psyche, how it became something. Of course, the Nakba, before Zochrot, before Eitan, is very important for me to remember that we don't come from nowhere, and none of us did anything alone. We are all in affiliation. Every idea, every project that Eitan launched or that we launched together later were born also after talks and exchange. Of course, important historians, and some of them are here tonight with us, brought also the Nakba into the Israeli discourse, but we wanted to show how activists start a little talk in the kitchen and how they made it to bring the Nakba into the public space. So by interrupting also this public space, what it means to be an activist in the Israeli street, how you do this, what technically, what practically it means. I like to see myself as a working in a critical pedagogy. I myself, I was formatted by Paulo Freire and the political anthropology. So it's very important for me to reconnect also all the work that we did and that we are continuing doing to this filiation. It's important for me because as you know, the history is written many times by people that are not the ones that make the event. So it was very important for me. We decided to write this book when Eitan and me left Zochrot, in fact. I was an activist there, that's how we met. And I wanted that this history of him would be somehow written somewhere. And it was very important for me also, in some extent, to show abroad some of those different alternative voices from within that Jeff mentioned. As I said previously, Eitan is not the only voice. It's one of them. It's important to give account to many of them that exist, because I still believe, or at least I was believing back then, I'm not sure I still share this hope today, but I was believing very strongly that it's important to enlighten those different voices. It was giving me some kind of hope back then. We will dig into this later, because I think I'm much less optimistic than what I used to be some years ago. And we can also not miss the chance to say that now we are not talking to you from Tel Aviv, as we could have done some years ago, but we live in Brussels. We moved there some 3.5 years ago. And we moved there because, for me mainly, it was unbearable to live as a Jew, as a proud Jew in Israel. There is if I want to summarize a bit why also we did this book, of course we did it as a dialogue, so it's mainly enlightening the story of Eitan, but within all the Israeliness, what it does, like you said it briefly, like how from a good kibbutznik, Eitan has all the coche toutes les cases, how you say this, like you're the very good Israeli, you're Ashkenaz, you are white, you did the army, you're kibbutznik, your name is Eitan, okay, you are the best kind of Israeli that can exist, if we might speak in this. And how this perfect ideal-typic example of Israel become one of the anti-Zionist voice, someone that is struggling from within. I think it was very important to give this story somehow.
Well, maybe tell us just in a few words about that transformation. I think people would be very interested to hear what was that, whether it's an event or a process or whatever that led to that, because it's not very usual in Israeli society.
Yeah. In fact, I think, yes, it's interesting that when I think about it, the main change, or the main, I would say, the main arena of change for me was the army, the Israeli army, that it's maybe is the most important Israeli organization, I would say, institute. When I drafted, it was 1979. Back then, it was not even a question that. Back then, there was, at least for me, I was not aware of any refusals to join the army, and even if I consider myself as lefty, 2 states back then. I never thought of refusing the army, and but then when I joined the army, just after the basic training already, we were not far from Nablus, and happened to me the first occupation incident, I would say. Back then, the occupation was relatively, let's say, comfortable for the soldiers, for the army. There was resistance, but it was not so violent. And the soldiers, I remember very well. We were going, with uniforms, with weapons, crossing the cities, Nablus or other cities in the West Bank. We didn't feel this fear that soldiers have today, and yet was kind of banal incident, first incident with the Palestinians, that we just post one mobile checkpoint on one side-ish road. All this we describe in the book, of course. And then I saw the behavior of every one of us. Like, this was a shock for me. Because one thing is to talk about it, you know, to say we are against occupation, all this. And another thing is when you actually take part in it. And it was not a violent situation, really not violent, you know, by like no really humiliations or violent or shouting or anything like this. But still, for me, I felt it like a kind of theater of oppression. You know, I think this have this term of
very much.
I think from
Freire.
Paulo Freire also, he talks about it, and it felt to me like a kind of crazy, tragic theater in which we play a role, because I couldn't, in a way, I couldn't believe that I'm what my role about. My role is to oppress these people. Who am I to check their cars and what am I looking for there at all? So it was the first incident, and I remember I talked to my parents about it and reflected. I was very angry, but okay, I continued doing the army, and then after the army, the first Lebanon war, just at my first reserve, and I hesitated a lot before I decided eventually to refuse the Lebanon war. This was like the first really split between me as a good soldier and the army that I never refused before anything.
This is in 1982?
Or? It was 1983 already. And then in the first Intifada again, when erupted the first Intifada in the end of 87, I knew that they are going to call me and I'm going to refuse, because if I said to myself, okay, I'm for the independence of Palestinian state, how come I will oppress their uprising? Moreover, when it was kind of peaceful, you know, non-violent, basically, Intifada, I'm talking mainly about the first Intifada, of course, and I was jailed twice, and all these jail terms were very important formation, politicization for me, very important. And then the last crisis, I would say, with Zionism was October 2000. When the eruption of the second Intifada, I took part in the demonstrations in Fahim with solidarity with thousands of Palestinians, solidarity with the Palestinians in the West Bank that were killed by Israel following the provocation of Ariel Sharon. And then I saw how Israel treat or behave when Palestinians are demonstrating and killing 13 Israeli citizens, Palestinians. So then I understood that the core, in fact, of this state, in the core, the main principle is that there can be no equality between Palestinians and Jewish Israelis within a Jewish state. Something that until then I didn't really realize. I thought, okay, we are struggling for equality in different domains, I don't know, budgets, education, whatever, like in each domain, we have to have equality with them. But of course, I understood that I understood only in 2000. I remember I understood, and I really then defined myself, and I said, okay, what's the barrier for peace? Still, the obstacle for peace is Zionism, in fact. And I remember I participated in one workshop in Cyprus that year exactly, and I said this and wrote this, and it was very clear to me for the first time that with Zionism, there will be never peace. And this is, I think, very shortly, this change, this process, yes, of change.
In your work, both of you, I mean, there's a lot of issues you could deal with, and a lot of Israelis that get involved, you know, talk about occupation, and you know, we're involved with house demolitions, and there's the wall, and there's settlements, and then there's the Israeli government. I mean, there's a lot of things, but there's a couple key elements to your work over all the years that really, I think, define, I don't know, all the elements that define what you do. I mean, one is in Zochrot, of course, that Eitan founded and Eleonore worked in. I mean, Zochrot is an organization that's dedicated, in part, to the right of return, and actually preparing for the return of the refugees, but really dealing with, you published a lot of maps, you published a lot of materials about the Nakba, about the displacement of Palestinians. That's one element. The second element is the Nakba itself. I mean, that seems to be, until, of course, with your latest book, I mean, that seems to be a real focal point, maybe an organizational hub around which you organize some of the other political issues. So that's a second element. And the third element is decolonization. I mean, the organization that you founded in now and that you're running now is called De-Colonizer.
Yeah.
So can you sort of say why those issues, the refugees, return of the refugees, decolonization, and Nakba, were those elements that you chose to kind of define your work?
Yeah, as we said, we believe in critical pedagogy. And following Paulo Freire, we believe that there is no such thing as a neutral education process. It either functions as a tool to integrate the hegemonic discourse, to be a good citizen, a good Israeli, or it can be what Paulo Freire called a practice of freedom. And the aim of all our work was, of course, first to recognize the role played by the oppressed into the education. We always said with Eitan, Zochrot was also saying it as such, and with De-Colonizer, we very much emphasize on it, that Palestinians didn't wait for us to know, to educate about the Nakba, to know about the Nakba, to advocate about the Nakba. We very early understood that our role in the struggle somehow is to recognize our Israeliness, our Jewishness, and what those elements bring us in this field. So also, like in the strengths, in my opinion, of the work that was done and that is done, is that we never pretended to talk into the name of Palestinians. Our role was to decolonize or colonize our identity. And this, it's first to recognize some of our privilege. We have access to the territory. Until now, we are yet not forbidden to enter on the territory. We have access to the language. We have access to the media. We have access to the public space. So what to do with those privileges? How to use your privileges as an ally, as someone that wants to see itself as an ally in this field. So it was very important for us to recognize also this and to say, okay, our work, it's to deal with ourselves. And it's very important also as a feminist, I always draw parallels, like it's not the role of women to educate men about what they should do. Educate yourself. So we apply it to ourselves as Israelis, as Jewish Israelis or Jewish in Israel in my case. We have to deal with this. And there is something very important for me, and that is also connected to the legacy of Freire, is that the oppressor, the Nakba, as it was said also in the video that you showed at the beginning, of course, the Nakba is a Palestinian history, of course, but it is also an Israeli history. It's also an history of the oppressor, the history of the ones that did actually it. So it's also important for us not to be all the time in this very Pavlovian reflex that you can hear a lot. It's their story. It's their narrative. It's not our story. And all our work was also to bring it as a part of our history. And it was important for us also and also Freire, what Freire tells us is that the oppressor itself must be willing to rethink their way of life, their way of thinking all the time. If liberation is the aim, so we have to educate ourselves. It's a very important point. And when we talk about the right of return in the Israeli society, it takes the same path. Most of the Israelis would have a first word of saying, okay, are you crazy? You want to bring back Palestinian refugees here? They are going to throw us to the sea. It's like, how dare you take their side? And it took us years, and it's still a work in progress, I must say, because I don't think we succeed to convince a lot, to make people understand that there is also how to say, like, it's important also for the future of Israelis. We are not talking about bringing back Palestine, acknowledging the right of return, bringing back the refugees, and then not giving rights to the people, the Israelis, to live there. This is, of course, not our discussion. But it's always seen as a struggle. It's them against us. So this us has to be, the border of this us can be removed all the time.
All right, I'll just to put in one little personal note. You know, I'm also an anthropologist, so Eleanor and I share that. But I also worked with Paulo Freire. I used to be the head of a Quaker college, actually, called Friends World College. And Freire was very involved with us, and I was even at his 70th birthday party. So we have that in common. Well, let me just go back and ask you then, what then is the, in terms of, well, the situation and where, let me ask you in a way, what is the goal of your work, or what is the focus, or what is the, in a way, the point of your work? Is it simply educational? Is it political in the sense, I mean, Eitan is a member with me of the One Democratic State campaign. Is this preparing some kind of an understanding and a grounding, leading people into political activity with a certain resolution in mind? I mean, with all the work that you've done and all the materials you prepared and all of the approaches educationally, what's the, I guess, what's the purpose of it? Where is it all going?
Yeah. Yeah, I have to say that yes, the answer, you mentioned education. Yes, we at Decolonizer, we see ourselves mainly as an educational organization, in the sense that we are producing materials. We wrote the book. We have this map you mentioned. I have it here just to show like this with the screen. The map with all the destroyed localities. It's a map that shows all the destroyed localities since the beginning of Zionist migration to Palestine until today and into the future in phases of time. And it shows, by the way, not only Palestinian destroyed localities, but also Syrian in the Golan Heights, Syrian Golan, that there were some 200 localities with 120,000 Syrians that were expelled, the war of 1967. Yes, and what we are doing is mainly through education, and we are producing materials. We see our role mainly as producing materials and information for people to use to understand better the colonial situation in this country. This is our main goal. Now, if you talk about our vision, we are always clear about it, or we write it about it in the book. Of course, our vision is our hope in the future is to see full equality there on the ground, hopefully in one state that will be, and of course not a Jewish state, but a democratic state, where all the refugees, Palestinian refugees, will be allowed to return. Doesn't mean that everyone must return, and we're not talking about forcing people to return. Many Israelis think that if talking about we are for the right of return, they think that we believe that everyone should return or something like this. It's not at all, of course. But they have the choice. The choice is the choice of the Palestinians and the descendants, of course, whether to return physically or to have other kind of settlement, of compensation. Yes, but to say that, like, how to move from the situation today and from the understanding of the colonial situation and how to move from here to this future. Today, I think I have to say openly that it's something that I have a hope and belief that one day it will happen, but unfortunately, I see less and less signs that this is something that it's in terms of political work of people like us, that I see that it's coming, or there is more discourse about it. But I have to just to make another reservation here. In fact, I have to say that I think the factor that it's maybe bringing some, I don't know if to say hope, but maybe a hope in terms of changing the situation profoundly. It's in fact the current Israeli government. I think the Israeli right-wing, extreme right-wing government that we have today in Israel have the potential to turn over the situation in such a way that will have a potential of a very big change also on the ground, and in terms also of political solution. And I mainly refer to the not because this government wants to have this solution, but because of the kind of loss of control that they might go through if they continue their projects. So it's difficult to tell, you know. I think always in Israel it's difficult to tell and to predict, of course, the future. But I think if there is something that can really change the situation, maybe we can see it in this extreme right-wing government in Israel. Yes.
All right. Maybe at this juncture, I'll give the floor over to Linda, so that all the participants or whoever has questions or issues can carry on the conversation with you guys as well. Linda, you want to,
Yes.
you're moderating the questions and
Yes.
comments, right?
Okay, yes, thank you very much. Before I go into the question, which is more substantial and meaty, so you said, Eitan, when you began, your book is in Hebrew, it's in French, now English, then hopefully Arabic. So your book is over in Israel, and it's being, well, do you know how well it's selling? Is it distributed in lots of places, or is it mainly in bookshops for people on the left?
You want the truth or the mythology? The mythology is that it's a huge success. The truth is that, I guess, out of the radical leftists and activists and people that are interested in the subject, it's not a very good selling book.
In Hebrew.
In Hebrew.
In French.
In French, it got more success, but we are not surprised, because there are many things in the book that was rewritten for the international audience, because there are things that you have to explain that you don't need to explain to Israelis, because it's about their Israeliness, but things that you have to explain. So for international, and of course, we are very aware of, like, what is it to be the glamour Israelis, the good Israelis for the activists, you know. They are Jews, they are Israelis, they are a couple, they are not Zionists. Okay, we are aware of also what it brings to the selling, by the way. So in France, it got a little success, but mostly, if we have to be honest, among the activists.
Yeah.
But the sphere of the activists in Europe is a bit wide than in Israel.
Yes, yes, very good. Well, we might come back to that a bit more later as well. But there's a question that's been put in the chat line from Robert Dewars, and I'm going to read it. I sometimes wonder to what extent Israeli citizens in general are potentially ashamed of their people's treatment of the Palestinians, and conceivably at all conscious of what brilliant disciples of the Nazis their people have become, from being shockingly oppressed themselves, turning into shocking oppressors. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I can say that unfortunately, most of the Israelis take of course, the opposite lesson from the Nazi experience or Nazi history or Second World War genocide that the Jews went through, and instead of struggling for never again for no one, the main lesson from the Holocaust in Israel is never again to us Jews, and mainly, in fact, Israeli Jews, Zionists mainly. And yes, I think for me as an Israeli, after the Nakba, the memory of the Holocaust is probably the worst memory problem that I have, or in general, maybe not, beyond memory, even education and the human problematics that I face in Israel and with Israelis. I have to say, I can tell you a short experience, Jewish experience, as since I'm here in Brussels since 3.5 years. I had some experiences that I felt suddenly a proud Jew. Like I was proud to be Jewish in the Holocaust commemorations here in Brussels. Jews that commemorated their resistance to the Nazi and of course mourn their loss of people here, and nothing to do with Israel, and nothing to do with we have to have a strong army, and Israel was not even mentioned in those very Jewish commemorations. And this was very moving experience for me, and also a feeling of liberation. Suddenly I said, wow, I can be really a proud Jewish, something that in Israel I usually felt shame to be Jewish.
Yeah, not only that we belong here to a Jewish organization here that make us very proud again to be Jews, which I experienced something different from Eitan, because I used to be a proud Jew before living in Israel, because I have this experience of being a Jew outside of Israel for most of my life. And then when I moved in Israel, I was deprived of my Jewishness somehow, and I could gain back again outside, again in Belgium. And the commemoration that Eitan just mentioned is very important, because not only we are here with proud Jews in Belgium that see themselves as leftists, that don't put Israel as the center of their life and their attention. Many of them don't care about Israel. But they do care about anti-racist struggle here in Belgium, about colonial past of Belgium in Congo. So they are very much Jews with their history. It's what also is different between us. It's from my memory, my family history of the Holocaust, that I take my activism. I'm not a feminist and an anti-colonialist activist, and I'm not struggling now for a better world and for free Palestine out of nowhere. I take all of that from my Jewish history. And by the fact that I remember my grandparents, I remember our people that was exterminated, and it's in the name of their memory that I'm struggling today. So it's also a very different way. I was not deprived all my life, like Eitan, from this Judaism. And what was so moving for us here also is that not only Israel is not their main point of attention, so of course, what a relief to go now in a commemoration for the ghetto of Warsaw without Israeli flag, without remembering why we need a strong army to defend ourselves, for it not to happen again, but to see also young people, because they have a youth movement that our kid is there, and we are very proud of it, that these kids of 14 years old, of 12 years old, are expressing why they remember this history and what it does to their political activism today. And this makes me intensely proud.
Excellent. Thank you for that helpful response. Right. I've not seen another question come up in the chat line just at the moment. I might be
Linda,
missing
one
something.
second, Linda. There was another part of the question that, and that.
Oh,
We
Jeff,
lost
we
you,
lost
Jeff.
your voice. Jeff, you muted.
Either whether Israelis feel shame, are they aware at all of the history or what's happened, or is there any sense of, for example, even today, you know, we're attacking Gaza, we're attacking the terrorists in Gaza, and people aren't aware in Israel who are the Gazans. The Gazans are probably 80% or something like that, refugees from 1948, from the Nakba. I mean, they're not like native Gazans that are, I mean, these are people that we displaced, that we, you know, and now 75 years later, we're bombing them still. Yeah. So I guess the question was, do Israelis have any sense of that, or any awareness, or, and of course, from that, as a questioner said, any shame?
Yeah, I think there is a knowledge about it. I think people know. For example, people would know. Many people in Israel would know that many people live in Gaza. Palestinians are refugees. Yeah. And in a survey that we did for our book, a special survey that we conducted by a professional institution that is doing surveys, asking 500 Israeli Jews if Israel has any responsibility for the refugee problem. We defined it in a way that most Israelis can understand this refugee problem from 1848, and we were quite surprised to find out that half of the Israeli Jews understand and know that, yes, Israel has a role in the creation of this refugee issue. But the problem, I think, Jeff, is not so much, it's not only about acknowledging or understanding this or knowing it. The point is, like, when it comes to either we or them, as Livnat said in the video that you showed at the beginning, always the Israelis put it like in a balance, it's either we or them. So even if they, okay, yes, we cause some issues and we have some responsibility, but when it comes to some violent issue situation, it's either we or them. And of course, we choose our side and the narrative, because this is the narrative that is exposed to us. It's not with the possibilities that how can we make it we and them together in some way. Yes, it's complicated, but it's possible. I'm sure it's possible. So it's kind of black and white story, and then always the Israelis are choosing our side.
I have a little different opinion, Eitan. I believe that denial is what makes Israeliness possible today. Without this denial, like when you are aware of what is done in your name, what is happening, it's more difficult to bear it. So I don't believe that Israeli citizens are ashamed of their government. I think quite the contrary. They are very proud of what it's done, and you see it like the result of the elections coming one after another one that is bringing more and right government is also an answer to that. You will have many people that will tell you that, yeah, okay, Netanyahu is maybe not doing this correctly, but he's protecting us. He's protecting us. And I think one of the way you see this eruption of reality into this denial is by the anger and the hate that can be heard and said and used by Israelis. Like, for example, when Israelis go to sit on sofa, on couch, on the Little Hill in front of Gaza or in front of Golan Heights to see the show of the bombing, it is somehow the reality is coming to this denial. Like, they cannot do as if nothing is happening. They have to do something with that, and they don't know. And what makes them very hungry, what they see when Palestinians do the March of Return. The Palestinians of Gaza organize March of Return. They are coming to what Israel set as a border. And the Israeli will tell you, you see, they want to come inside and they want to kill all of us. The single idea of being threatened as a colonial presence, it's terrible for them, because what these demonstrators, these Palestinians want to show them is that 70 years after, they do not give up on their right of return. They do not give up on their wish to come back. And this is unbearable for many of them, because it comes to remind them who they are, how colonial they are. They are colonizers there. And by the way, sorry to say, but I have to say something about that. Not only, I think they are not ashamed, but I think this consensus that is done about the hatred of the other is what maintains the Israeli society. That it's also a very segregated society in terms of economy. There are very poor and very rich people. All the Israelis are not Israeli the same. Better you are white, you are better Israeli than when you are black or when you are Arab Jews. And all this how you said
Cracks.
All these cracks are covered when you have a common enemy. So there is an interest for me to maintain this common enemy.
Right. And thank you. Moving on to another question. Could there ever be a hopefully growing understanding that healthy Palestinian involvement in the economy of the country could be hugely beneficial? Can you see that question? Should I repeat it?
No, we see it, yeah. So, healthy Palestinian involvement in the economy of the country.
I guess maybe part of the idea might be, besides the threats and the existential dangers and everything else, would there be a way of maybe another kind of an approach would be to show Israelis that in fact there'd be a lot of advantages to them reconciling with the Palestinians and bringing the Palestinians, even having one state, because Palestinians are among the most educated of the Arab populations. They're very involved in business and all kinds of economic things. They have a very rich diaspora that would invest. In all kinds of ways, it would actually be good for Israelis. So rather than the zero-sum game where either they win or we win, could we somehow frame it in a way that it's actually good for the Israelis to open up and try to welcome? Is that at all a kind of an approach?
Yeah, first of all, the war is expensive. The war costs Israelis a lot of money. Like, when you don't need to invest into protecting yourself or securizing yourself, you can invest in education, in health, in women's rights. So of course, all the occupation is costing money. And of course, there would be a huge benefit of granting all those talents. Of course, you said it, Palestinians are among the more educated. I don't remember the rate of education among the kids. It's like unbelievable. Despite the condition, it's unbelievable. So of course, Israel will benefit from that. But can Israel bear so much non-Jewish Israeli talents in Israel. I don't know. I don't know how it's possible, like in the setting that we build there.
Yeah, not in Israel. After Israel, yes.
After Israel, but it will not be Israel.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
We've got time for one more question before we do a summary. And I'm going to call upon Cheryl Hogan because she said that it'll be easier for her to speak about it rather than to put it into writing. So Cheryl, can you unmute, please?
Yes. Hello, Linda and Jeff. Nice to see both of you. I've been on 2 work camps with you, and I've learned a lot from both of you. And I also want to say that I took a delegation to Palestine more than once, but one of them I took over to Zochrot to see what you are doing. And I think it's a very important organization. I think it's very, very educational for anybody, any outsider, to know that the work you're doing. My question is, I just recently had this feeling I need to write a letter to my newspaper, and I wanted to title it something very provocative, which would be, Israel is not a Jewish state. I would like to hear you comment on that, because what I hear, to me, the values of Judaism are, they're beautiful. And they manifested in this country, as you all know, in the civil rights movement, where Jews were on the front lines all the time. And here you have Israel behaving in a way which to me does not meet those values at all. It's contrary. And maybe Zionism has always been contrary, but could you comment on that? Thank you.
Yeah, I think it goes with the lines of what we said, maybe mainly what Eleonore said and feels. Yeah, I think I would say, if I understand, I guess I understand your point or your intention, and I would say that it's not a Jewish state in the sense of what I want to see, or I see Judaism, what it means to be Jewish for me or for you in that case. But we have to admit that for many Jewish Israelis, Zionism convinced them that this is the right way to be Jewish, and Israel is a Jewish state in the sense of Zionism, which means that this land belongs only to us, and by redeeming the land and making it a Jewish place only for Jews with as few as possible Palestinians in it, and second or third class citizens, then it's the best. And this is how we want, or they want, the Israeli Jews, the Zionists want to express their Judaism too. So I think it's a very strong argument, it's a very important voice from Jews like you to say and to tell to Israel that what you are doing is not my Judaism. And in fact, I'm ashamed of this Judaism. And you are talking in the name of the Jews. This is terrible, I think, yes.
Yeah, I think one of the main victory ideologically of Zionism is their success into blurring the lines between Judaism, Jewishness, Israeliness, and Zionism. And it's not working only in Israel, it's working in Europe very well when the definition of anti-Zionism as a new shape of anti-Semitism is adopted. So it's a very strong victory. And I think one of our role, one of our main raison d'être in this world of activism, it's exactly using our Jewishness, reclaiming Jewishness from Zionism and being vocal about it. So I'm always applauding every Jewish voice I hear that is like clearly standing for social justice. It's very important. And I think it's one of the results also of what Eitan says, that the more Israel is Israel in its in all what it's doing every day, the more so the Jewish humans around the world, many of them are standing against what is done into our name, because we cannot deny that Israel is talking in our name as Jews. So for me, I see that we don't have so many options. Either we agree, so then everything is perfect.
We are silent.
Or we are silent, which we were told by history that being silent in case of oppression is being in the sign of oppressor.
Yeah.
Or we are vocal, and this is the third way that you all chose and that we chose also. But it's very important, and I want to say that it's important not only for us, but Angela Davis was in Brussels some months ago. So I'm a Jew. I don't believe in God. I believe in Angela Davis. This is my God. And she was here in Brussels some months ago, and she met many activists. She was wonderful, of kindness and of interest. And she told us something very important. She said, you know, I know how activism is exhausted, how you are tired, all of you, how you are exhausted, you want to give up, I know all of that, and I know it very well. But remember that you cannot give up, because maybe you won't see it happening, but maybe your kids will see it happening, or your grandkids will see it happening. And for this future, we have to continue to struggle. So many times people are telling us, okay, so you left Israel, so now you gave up the struggle. And we say, what? No, we are taking more energy abroad to strengthen the struggle. So it's for me important to emphasize that the struggle is an ongoing process also, and that there is no little victory. And I know how I'm full of despair. So I will not tell you how the world is amazing. I'm very desperate about what's happening, but I still believe in our capacity, each of us, to struggle, and there is not little victory.
I could listen to you for hours, even though you come across, you say that you're not very optimistic, but being together like this has been generating energy. You've brought more understanding to us. You know, with what ICAHD is doing, what we're doing, I mentioned the study tours and stuff. When we go over there, we always make sure that not only do we spend time in the occupied territory, but we go into the state of Israel as well, to meet critical Jews, to learn from them, because knowing, again, your future has got to be together. So we've learned from you tonight. We have to bring this meeting to a close. I would like, Jeff, did you want to say anything first before I give the announcements? And thank you all, Jeff.
No, I'll just say really briefly, first of all, Michael Lerner, who's an American rabbi and very much on the left, who's the editor of Tikkun magazine, once I think wrote an article entitled "Zionism Murdered Judaism." So, you know, I think a lot of American Jews and a lot of Jews abroad are very aware of that as well. Anyway, I think, you know, it was very appropriate that the Nakba was our focus tonight. And just to emphasize the fact that I think, you know, besides marking the Nakba itself, it really reveals, you know, Israel's intentions, or the intentions of and the purposes of Zionism, which was to displace the Palestinians and to transform an Arab country into a Jewish country. So I think the Nakba has a lot to teach us. You know, I've just been in a conference just today and tomorrow. There's a group that has a federation idea, you know, Or Yiftachel, and it's called One Land Together or something like that. And, you know, I talk about federation, but all these approaches are very technical. If we just put the border here and we give some people some citizenship and we let people move around a little bit, we share the economy a little bit, everything will be, that's and they don't get into, even these people on the left that are trying to work out different solutions, the problematic of Zionism being a settler colonial movement. And that's not just a saying, that means something. And that's the logic and dynamic of what we're going through today. And unless you deal with that, you're not going to get anywhere. And I think a lot of the Israelis that are trying to find kind of liberal approaches like a federation or a confederation, they're all variations of the two-state idea, and they're all kind of desperate attempts to salvage something out of Zionism. So I think the Nakba really is in our face, and really, if you can confront the Nakba, then that really does open you up in a very critical way, a Freirean kind of a way, towards being able to cope with the implications of what does it mean to go beyond Zionism and to really conceive of a country of all its people. So thank you, Eleonore and Eitan, for the evening. And I'll turn it back to you.
Okay.
Linda.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Jeff. Thank you, Eleonore. Thank you, Eitan. It's wonderful. Can we just bring up the slides now, please, Malcolm? Because we want to start really with, again, highlighting your book. We want to encourage everybody to order your book, read it. I can't wait to read it myself. And we also remember Jeff's book, which is Decolonizing Israel, Liberating Palestine, Zionism, Settler Colonialism, and the Case for One Democratic State. I think your books are quite different, actually. I think it's definitely worth reading both of them. So we look forward to hearing more from you, and hopefully you will have a book tour in the UK. So we'll keep talking to you about that. Okay, next slide, please.
Next year in the UK.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, now this slide is about this new film that we heard about tonight. We saw the clip that featured Livnat and then Haim. And there you can see the list of other names. This is an 18-minute film. It'll be on the website within a few days. So come look at it and then spread it around as well. It's very important that we lift these critical Israeli voices. Next slide. There's a big demonstration scheduled for this Saturday in London. So people in the UK, if you can, please get to London for noon. We'll lift our voices. We want to let the Palestinian people know that they are not forgotten, and to show the UK government that we will not be silent until justice is done. Good. Next slide. Okay, ICAHD UK is doing something for the very first time. We're going to have a benefit concert. You know, this year we set a target of raising £10,000 to help keep us sustainable, to have a conference, to attend events, things like Greenbelt, just to really be involved with our campaigns and activism here. So far, we've raised around £1,700, but we've got a long way to go to reach that target. So on the 14th of June, we've got an online benefit. You can see we've got a range of people participating, from musicians, actors, poets, dancers, and comments from very good friends of ours. The compere is actor Norma Cohen. Please, please, please check out our website, register for it, and give generously to us that evening. Next slide. Learn more about our work. You know, I've mentioned the website for a start. That website, with ICAHD having launched in 1997 and all through the years, we've collected a tremendous amount of information on the website, which we keep up to date as best we can. We're pretty good at it, I must say. But we also send out a couple of communications every month, mid-month, actions you can take. We spell out ideas for you so that you can get involved. And then at the end of the month, we have a newsletter with information, analysis, articles, things like that. If you're not on our mailing list, please add your name. You can go to our website and you will find where to register, and follow us on social media. And then the last slide. And the last slide is about joining us, because we are a membership organization. You know, we're not a charity, we're political. It's very hard for us to raise money, so we're dependent upon people like you, ordinary people from civil society, to support us. Join us, £5 per month or £2 as a monthly concession rate, but we're there to help inform you, equip you for campaigning, to help change history that we all long for. Thank you. That's the last slide. Information. So again, thank you so very much, Jeff, Itai, and Eitan, I should say, and Eleonore, for being with us this evening. You know, we want to send you away saying we are part of this struggle. We are going to remain together in this struggle. And I say that to everybody in the audience as well tonight. So thank you for joining us. We hope to see you again very soon, and free Palestine and free the Jewish Israelis as well from their mentality. So here's to freedom for all. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you for all your work. It's amazing for us. It's very inspiring also. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Jeff.
Excellent.